Hello, hi, I'm Maya Andreasen, and this video is part one of a kind of intro to some modeling techniques in Maya. So let's get started. As you can see, we have Maya set up here, it's open. And I'm not going to go over how to move around in Maya and those things. I'm assuming you know those. These are just basically some modeling basics. So first off, we have three primitive objects here. We have a NURBS object, and we have a polycube and a sphere cube, or a polygonal sphere. Sorry about that. All right, so first let's talk about the difference between NURBS and polygons. So NURBS stand for non-uniform rational basis spline, right? That's a mouthful, so we just call them NURBS. And it's a mathematical model commonly used in computer graphics for generating and representing curves and surfaces. So NURBS are great if you want to get a base for a more complex form that has curves to it. They're not manipulated the same as polygons. And NURBS, other differences are their UVs are already laid out and you cannot manipulate them at all. Before I get any further and go into a breakdown of NURBS, I do want to explain what this is here. This is the poly count that I have in my scene. So when I select something like my cube, you'll see that it tells me how many vertices that it has. So it has 8 vertices. Edges, it has 12. How many faces, how many tries, and how many UVs. And if I select my sphere over here, you will see that it gives me that same information. So the vertices are 382 and 780 edges and so on and so forth. And you can see that there's more here is because this is the combined amount in my scene. So it's both of these, right? And so when I select them both, you see that these numbers match. And when I select just one, it breaks down that one singular object. Okay, and the way you can get your poly count to be visible is to go to display, heads up display, poly count, which is great. So let's talk a little bit more about NURBS and how to manipulate them and polygons. And there's several different ways that you can switch between both object mode and component mode. So the first way is up here. So right below your main menu is a menu full of icons. It's the icon equivalent of your menu. And let's actually close this so we can open it for you. So this is object mode and this is component mode. Okay, and then if we click this little line with the arrow, we open up and we see more options for your components, similar to the modeling toolkit over here. But let's go back to NURBS. So NURBS are different from polygons. So polygons have edges, vertices, and faces that are the main ways that you manipulate them. And by the way, this is the other way that you can switch back and forth between component mode and object mode. You right mouse press and a marking menu pops up. And I use this a lot. Whatever your preferred way is, that's fine. Okay, so let's go back to object mode and go here. All right, so for NURBS are made up not of polygonal geometry, but the non-uniform rational basis splines. And so like any spline, you're going to manipulate its curves and what we call isoparms. So that's what these subdivisions are. And right now I'm left mouse clicking and dragging. And if you wanted to add a new subdivision, you would go to Surfaces, Insert Isoparm. That's how you add new subdivisions in NURBS. Now if I right mouse press again, I can go to Control Vertices. Same with over here in the modeling toolkit. So it's the equivalent. And so I can select a control vertice and I can move it and shape it. If I right mouse press and go to Hull, that's another way to manipulate a NURBS object. And this way is great because you can select a whole subdivision very easily. And then you can make it bigger or smaller accordingly. The other thing that you can do is you can use your arrow keys. So this is my right and my left arrow keys to basically go to the next level of hull to the next hull subdivision very easily, so you can manipulate it. And then the other thing that's great is if you switch back to control vertices, you have this whole row of control vertices selected, and you can still use your arrows, right, to go up and down and manipulate accordingly. So maybe you want to do something like this, and then maybe bring this in, and now all of a sudden we very quickly have a vase shape. And then if I right mouse press and go to isoparm and select this isoparm, I can go to surfaces, and like I can detach. So I could detach this and go back to object mode, and I actually have now two objects. And so I could delete it, and now I have the basis for a nice vase, right? Maybe a terracotta vase or something of that nature. And so I very quickly created this shape, and then it can be converted to polygons, and I can lay out the UVs or manipulate the shape more. But very quickly I have this simple shape that is more complex and would be harder to create very quickly using a polysphere or a polycube. All right, so let's talk more about how to switch modes, and we're going to do it with polygons. So once again, let's go over the fact that we can go up here to right below Windows and Mesh, and we have our handy dandy tooltip which tells us what these are. So this is select component mode, and this is select object mode. The next way that we can switch between component and object mode is by right mouse pressing on an object, which brings up a marking menu. And so you can switch from object, edge, vertex, right, vertex face, face mode, multi UVs and UV shells, right, and back to object mode. The third way that we can affect go back and forth between component and object mode is actually F8. So F8 on your keyboard, if you click it, you're going to go to component mode, and then you could go back to object mode. If you are using, I'm on my desktop, so F8 works without clicking anything else. But if you're on a laptop, it's probably function F8, which allows you to switch back and forth. Typically when I'm working on my laptop, I just go to my modeling toolkit or right mouse press to get the marking menu up. But when I'm on desktop, F8 works really, really quickly and well. To further manipulate our components, we can also go to the modeling toolkit. So here if I click this is object mode, and as you can see, a marking menu or a tooltip pops up. This yellow box is a tooltip. I can go to component mode or vertices, right? And it tells you, hey, F9 will get you to vertices. You can also do control left mouse to convert selection to vertices, left mouse B. You can control shift LMB, convert selection to vertex parameters. So it gives you a ton of shortcuts that you have access to very quickly if you use your, if you just hover over the object and then look at what the options are in terms of the tooltip. So if I do to F10, that goes to edges. And if I do F8, or F9, that is vertices, and F11 is faces, and F12 is UVs. So that's really great to know. So if I go to F8, right, I'm in object mode. F9, vertex, edges, and faces. So that's another way that you can switch to the various components and switch between object and component mode. All right, so let's go a little bit more into how you can add subdivisions and what some of the options are in our modeling toolkit. So I'm going to go back to my channels, and I'm going to hit F8. And as you can see, we have our polycube under the inputs here. So if I click polycube, so if I hit polycube, you'll see that I added to the width, height, and depth 222. But I can also add different subdivisions automatically. So I could do 2 in the width, maybe 3 in the height, and maybe 2 in the depth. So I have very quickly added subdivisions to my model. I very quickly added subdivisions to my model, and it didn't take really any time at all. I didn't have to click any special commands to do so. Now, once you start manipulating this model, giving it extrusions, moving any of these edges or vertices, you cannot go back and add subdivisions in the inputs. And what it'll do is it will actually mess up your model and corrupt it, and you might not be able to undo. So the best thing to do is, once you've added the subdivisions that you want, just to delete history, so you don't have that option anymore. So the way, this is history on my shelf. The way to get to history is edit, delete by type history, and if you want to add it to your shelf, you hit Control Shift and click history. Now I have 2 histories on my shelf. If I wanted to delete an extra node, I right mouse press, I click delete. All right, so let's go to our modeling toolkit. Okay, so we have a couple things here. Let's go to face mode, and we can select faces. So right now we have pick marquee selected, right? Which is great. Now what does drag do? Well, if you do drag, you can drag to select the amount of faces that you want, and you don't have to worry about them being selected on the other side. So it's really helpful, this drag. You can do the same thing if you press tab. So if you press tab, it brings about this same drag option, and you can also deselect very easily too. So anything that is selected, you'll see the little minus here, and then you can see a plus. So tab does the same thing as drag. Okay. All right. Okay, we also have highlight back faces, highlight nearest components. These are automatically checked on. You have the options for camera-based selection, which selects only camera-facing components. So if we turn this on, what that means is only the components that are facing the camera would be selected. Anything that's not facing the camera will not be selected. So that is what that means. So it's really great. We'll turn it off now. We also have the option for symmetry. So if I turn on Object X, what it's going to do is going to select anything on the opposite side, and then it tells you, hey, symmetry Object X is on. And obviously there's World X as well. There's Object Y, Object Z, and there's topology. So with topology, it's going to select the edges. Okay. And then what we can do is we can also turn it off. So that's really great. If we come to, so let's say we want to extrude, and we want to extrude on multiple sides, but we want to add a couple subdivisions first. So there are several ways that you can add subdivisions really easily. You can edge, add divisions. There's 2 divisions here, right? And if we went to component mode, you would see, or not component, vertices mode, you would see that we have this extra vertices. Okay. But the easiest way I find is to go to Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop, and so you can just insert like that. Now if we had symmetry on, then we could add at the same time, right? We could add on both sides the insert edge loop. Other things that we can do with that tool under Mesh Tools, if you go to the options box, you could do multiple edge loops. So by default it's 2. So if I did this, I would create 2 evenly spaced edge loops within this section, which is handy. And then you can always reset the tool to get it back to default. Okay. All right, so next let's go over extrude. So we're going to go to our face mode and the extrude tool. And we're going to turn on symmetry as well. Let's go back to symmetry. So we now have the extrude tool, right? So let's select this and extrude. And we should be able to extrude. So we have our manipulator back. So just an FYI, if you turn symmetry on, you're going to get this. if you turn symmetry off, you will get your full manipulator, which that's what we want right now. So right now we have our full manipulator, and as you can see, there's this little blue circle that looks like a power button, and if you click it, what that's going to do is put us in world mode. So there are differences between how you can extrude in world mode and local mode. If you are trying to extrude, like say 2 sections at the same time, I would recommend local mode, right? Because then you're going to get something like this. Also, you can hit G, and G actually repeats the last action, whatever the last action is that you just did, which in this case is extrude, or it should be. Let's hit extrude again. And go in, and then hit G, and there we go. Now it's working. So G repeats your last action, whatever that last action was, and in this case, it's extrude. All right, so as you can see here, we can do extrude. You can also hit Shift, and Shift should allow you to extrude. If we just hit Q, and then hit W with our manipulator, and then Shift, you'll see that we have the extrude option, just like that. And we can also undo it, or we can redo things, right? Okay, so that is the extrude tool. We also have the bevel tool here. So I'm going to start with a brand new cube for the bevel tool, because the bevel tool is it's imperfect. It works nicely, but it doesn't work very well on very complex objects. So let's just make this 2 by 2 by 2. We're going to bring it up 1 unit in the Y, and then we're going to go back to our modeling toolkit, and we're going to click bevel. So let's click bevel. Now this bevel is pretty intense, so we can go to fraction here, and we can make this smaller, so we can make it 0.1. We can add depth to it. We can add segments, like 2 segments. So now our bevel is a little bit more complex. Let's go back to 1 for our depth, and it's more round. So 2 makes it sharper in depth, 1 makes it more beveled, more round. So you could do all of these things within the modeling toolkit. Now you can also go to edit mesh, and you can go to bevel's options, the bevel option box, which is, where are we? Right here. So we could go to the bevel options box, it's right here, and all of these same options are here. So you could change the segments, depth, and width, and you could do all of those before you even before you hit the bevel tool at all. So you do all this and you hit bevel, and it will bevel to those options automatically, instead of having to go into here and manipulating in this box. But either way works. All right, so the next thing that we can do is we can go to faces, and we can select the face here. And so let's say you have a face that's gone, and you want to add a new face. So you can bridge, you can use bridge. So we have to go to edges here. And so if we select both of our edges, we can click bridge, and that will build them back up. The other thing that we can use is called append to polygon. So that's going to be under mesh tools, append to polygon, and it's going to tell you what to do. Click boundary edge, then click to place a new vertice. And it even gives you arrows that say, hey, go in this direction to create the proper flow and create the face. So those are 2 different ways that you can bring back a face or fill in a gap. It gives you more control over how to do that. Okay, and last, of course, is adding divisions. So we can do that too. And it says here, subdivide the selected edges or faces. So I'm going to select these 2 and add division, and it's added it. So it's added these points. Now it hasn't added a line between them. So that is something that now I would have to go to my multi-tool and bridge these gaps. Or I could use my connect tool to also do that. So if I went to my vertices, I can click connect, select this, and then hit shift and click, and then enter. So that's another way that you can add subdivisions beyond the insert edge loop tool. So you can add custom edges that way. But you can also do the multi-tool here. And what's cool about the multi-tool is we can go here, and then here, and then here, and hit enter. I know that's a little sloppy, but it shows you how you can add things really quickly. All right, so the last thing I'm going to show you guys in this video is we can do the same things that we did with the cube, we can do with a sphere. And if we go to our polysphere here, we can increase the radius. So I can make it 2, I can make it 1.5. Right now the subdivisions, they're 20 by 20, so I could do 10 by 20, or 15 by 20, or 15 by 15. If I just wanted to lower my subdivisions really quickly, I could do 16 by 16. So you can very quickly lower or increase the amount of subdivisions that you have. Like I could do 30 by 30, and this makes it very round, right, and a lot higher poly. So this is a really fast way to create a new amount of subdivisions on your primitive. Now, once you start manipulating this primitive in terms of extrusions or scaling certain edges or anything like that, so if I double clicked on this edge, selected the whole edge flow right there, and started scaling and extruding and do things like that, we do not want to go back to our base inputs here and do any changes. So best to just delete history as soon as possible, as soon as you've gotten this to the amount of subdivisions that you want. All right, that is it for this video. In our next video, we'll be going further into the modeling toolkit and talk about some of the other options and tools that it provides. Until next time, I'm Maya Andreasen. Bye-bye.